And I got a letter today. We all got the same letter, and I want to address that before we go to testimony in case there's any confusion about that letter. So this is the view from my office window up here. And our health district tells us that it's literally detrimental to our health to walk outside right now. Restaurant patios sit open, our trail systems are unhiked, and there's people with surgical masks waiting at bus stops. There's no kayakers on the Spokane River. Scientists, journalists, and common sense says this is not normal. So aren't we called to do something about it? Are we not obligated to ensure that we don't trash this place for future generations? And I'm not talking about 50 years down the road. I'm talking about the kids that'll be starting kindergarten in a couple of weeks right here in our schools. They deserve a city government that is looking out for their future. And that's what this ordinance intends to do. It puts stakeholders together to take responsibility for our future. This should not be controversial. In all honesty, it isn't controversial. It's only controversial because a couple of groups want you to believe that the creation of a citizen-led committee to work on sustainability issues like reducing the risk of wildfires is controversial. Last Thursday, GSI and a group called Better Spokane teamed up to ask their members to sign on to a letter to oppose this ordinance that creates a citizen-led advisory committee to work on meeting the sustainability goals of our city. GSI literally sent this letter out in the middle of a meeting with the city council in which they asked the council to give more taxpayer dollars to fund their work. Their partner in this opposition, Better Spokane, is a dark money political action committee. Better Spokane says that they should have been invited to the table from the beginning. Really? The same organization that took $350,000 from coal and gas interests to defeat a Spokane citizen initiative. The same organization who used dark money to partner with the Steve Bannon-owned foreign data company Cambridge Analytica to steal our citizens' data to influence local political campaigns. They believe they should have been included in this process to determine the makeup of a citizen-led advisory committee to guide the city in our environmental and sustainability issues. No thanks. And to be frank, I find it embarrassing that our local Chamber of Commerce would share their letterhead with an organization that treats our citizens and their privacy with such complete disregard. So let me get to this letter because I find it comical in the number of doozies that it contains. It's quite a collection. Let's go. Slide number 2. They couldn't even get through the opening paragraph before they told a whopper. Nothing in this ordinance mandates that citizens only buy renewable energy by a certain time. Read the real language on the slide. It establishes goals, something you work towards, like, I hope I can run a marathon in under 4 hours next year. If I don't, I'll be disappointed, but I won't get sued. I'll just keep trying harder. This advisory committee is created to help develop a plan to meet our goals. In fact, the only mandate through the entire ordinance is for this committee to keep our sustainability action plan updated, create the plans that help us meet our sustainability goals, do a thorough fiscal analysis on any potential policies and projects that would help us get these goals, and to provide us a progress report every few years. That's it. Slide 3. GSI and Better Spokane want you to believe that because they weren't invited to participate, that this policy was crafted in the dead of night in the closet of the darkest, most secretive room in City Hall. It wasn't. The work group was citizen-led. The proposed policy was crafted by council members and their staff, and it is filled with input from stakeholders, including Avista, local tribes, and yes, terrifyingly smart environmental experts who get called activists because they are asking their local government to act on scientific fact. The opponents of this citizen committee want you to believe that a bunch of environmental political activists ran in here and ran something down our throat. That's not true. The ordinance went through the typical legislative process. It went to committee, had the appropriate number of readings, all of which were public meetings. The mayor claimed that his staff didn't see this ordinance before committee. He's probably right. When his environmental programs director tells my staff that she can't work on anything that involves council legislation, we make the assumption they're not interested in participating. But if there's one thing I've learned in this job is when things are not going your way, just yell, "The process is broken," 12 times, and hopefully that problem will go away for you. Slide 4, and it doesn't go away. Slide 4, the opponents say we need to have a diversity of viewpoints on this advisory committee, aka they want us to add people that don't believe in basic climate science to this committee that helps advise the city on policies and projects that help us mitigate and adapt to the impacts of a changing climate based on climate science. It's like putting a person who doesn't believe in the Civil Rights Act or the city's non-discrimination law and the Human Rights Commission. We don't put people on the bicycle advisory board that want to get rid of bike lanes. We don't put people on the library board that want to get rid of libraries. And we're not going to put someone on this advisory committee that can't look outside, that looks outside and tells us this is normal. Ignoring climate change is not acceptable advice. This committee is advisory, just like all committees in the city. This proposed committee is no more or less powerful than the committees who currently provide great advice and great work on behalf of the city. And at the end of the day, it comes back to the 7 policymakers up here, and you're looking at them. Slide 5. Better Spokane and GSI continue their bogus claims by saying city officials estimate that it's going to cost millions of dollars. Which city officials? The same ones that wanted this council and the taxpayers to pick up a $58 million tab for a parking garage? I don't have an envelope up here, but based on my trusted calculations on the back of this piece of paper, I would say the cost of creating a citizen advisory committee to work with the city to implement our sustainability goals is closer to 0 than it is to 20 million. The same cost arguments were made when the city moved to recycled paper, when we eliminated permit fees on electric vehicle charging stations and solar energy systems, when we changed the law to require any new buildings to be LEED certified, and when we passed the sustainability ordinance last year that codified the same goals this new committee will be working to help us attain. These groups want you to believe that their local utility company is going to raise your energy rates because of this ordinance. Any private company that sees even the slightest possibility of public policy impacting revenue or profit margins will always use we have to pass that on to customers to oppose the policy. It's expected and appropriate. Let's imagine that the local utilities do seek a rate increase to pay for some of the capital investments needed to get us off fossil fuels and invest in renewables. They won't have to make their case to the Citizen Committee or to the Spokane City Council. They'll have to justify those rate increase requests to the Washington Utilities and Transportation Committee, who will have the final say. Our job as a city is to make it as easy as possible to help them meet these goals. That's our authority and that's our charge. Slide 6. And perhaps at first, GSI and Better Spokane say that this ordinance explicitly implies impacts to building and energy codes that will drive up rents and housing prices. How can something be both explicit and implied and be both not included in the ordinance and not inferred at all? I'm confused as well as you. Let me be explicit. This assertion by these organizations is not true. The Planning Commission is the body responsible for recommending changes to building and energy codes, and their recommendations come from the fire department, state changes, and industry professions. These organizations know that. They just hope that you don't know that. Slide 7. Last one, and as expected, it's going to wreck our economy, cost local jobs, and put Spokane at a disadvantage. That's a regular argument I've heard in the last 6.5 years. It's regular when stuff like sick leave, fair chance hiring, public works apprenticeship, and environmental policies come before this body for consideration. All I know is that last month's sales tax numbers were up double digit. People are investing in our community and people want to move here. But let me be clear, we're not the first community to set the goal around renewable energy. We're not even the first in Washington State. Whatcom County and Edmonds beat us to it. Some of our nation's best performing economic cities have made this same commitment. San Jose, 100% renewable by 2022. San Francisco, 100% renewable by 2030. Denver, 100% renewable by 2030. Boulder, 2030. Atlanta, 2035. Minneapolis, Madison, Orlando, Portland, Salt Lake City, you name it. I'm not sure I recognize the economic disadvantage in adopting this ordinance. If a business doesn't want to locate in Spokane because we are committed to sustainability and not interested in wrecking what is left of our environment, then so be it. Here's the deal. I could go on all night picking apart the rest of their letter. They talk about nuclear power. How many nuclear power plants do you see around here? They say it'll hurt the waste energy facility. No, it won't. In fact, I want this group to study how we can cap the carbon emissions coming out of the waste energy plant. I want this group to give us some ideas on how to better utilize the energy we create at the plant. The economic and job creating possibilities as this group can come up with is absolutely exciting and amazing. And it doesn't really matter how many complete fabrications we point out in this letter. The opposition to this ordinance really just boils down to 2 types. The ones that can look out the window at the wildfire smoke engulfing our city and call it normal. And those who recognize something is not quite right with our climate, but are completely okay with somebody else absorbing the financial and health-related costs. This issue is too critical to take either opposition seriously at all. Thank you to all those who worked on this. This is important stuff. I look forward to appointing people, some of you may be in this room, to this committee in the future. And even if you don't serve on the committee, there's always room for you to participate in taking care of our planet. We need you. Thank you very much. Bruce Howard, you're up. No laughing, no clapping. We got to keep this orderly from now on.
He goes to town. He goes to town. He gets animated, and it is worth watching, and I will send the link to Jeff. City Council President was a former debater, and he was in full debate mode. He was not appreciative of the letter, and it was amazing to see him take them to task from City Council chambers in such a direct way. And we just happened to be right on one of our worst air days. Could not have been staged better because, I mean, they opened one of the windows to the council chambers and just kept pointing out the window, as a prop. It was sort of, it was quite interesting to watch. So, the letter had an effect, but we already, had fully secured sort of all of the support that we needed. So it didn't end up, changing the outcome. They were my daughters. 13 and 15, middle school and high school. So we ended up getting a lot of pretty decent coverage for Spokane. We only have a couple of media outlets, the Inlander, local radio, and as far as print sort of things, and then the Spokesman Review, and we were able to get coverage in all of those. We had, as I'll mention in a second, we had sort of tried to cultivate some relationships, and hopefully we've already done that with some local reporters. Got to know the guy at Spokane Public Radio quite well, and he ended up doing 3 stories in the Spokane Public Radio on this over the course of its saga, which was great. And so you can, using those media contacts can be really, really effective if you can find them. We had very little luck with TV. If you can break into that would hit a demographic which is really hard to hit, but really important. And we just had no luck getting them to talk about it at all. So I hope you have better luck with that. We even got a little coverage from the Seattle Times. I remember I was driving my daughter to viola practice, and this journalist calls me, and I'm driving in the car to viola practice. He was doing a piece that Trump had just said this, and he was saying, look, Spokane, Washington is passing 100% renewable ordinance while Trump is saying this. And so he used it sort of as a prop to make a point that he was making that day in the Times, which was nice. So that was the 20th of August. I was told by the City Council President's aide, there's no way he's going to veto this. It's just really not in his political best interest. He knows we've got a supermajority. He knows it's going to be overridden. He won't do that. He did do that. He has vetoed maybe 4 things in the last 6 years. This, I think, being the 4th or 5th. So there's again a pretty acrimonious relationship between the council and the mayor. And they had tried to do a number of things. He'd asked them to do a number of things to satisfy him. For example, initially we were calling it a Sustainability Action Commission. He asked for it to be called a committee, so we did. The city owns a dam and a waste-to-energy plant, and between those two things, if you count up all the energy that they produce, it probably amounts to the amount of adds up to the amount of energy that the city operations uses. So the city was claiming it's already meeting. In terms of the city operations, we had 2 goals in the ordinance. It said by 2020, the city of Spokane should be 100% renewable. By 2030, the whole city community should be on renewable electricity. They wanted us to say we're already doing it in the city, which was fine. Actually, depending on how you calculate it, it probably is true that they were creating more energy than they were using between the dam and the waste-to-energy plant. I'll get to the waste-to-energy plant if that was your question.
No, I was trying to understand. You're saying the city operations when you say the city of Spokane.
There was a little bit of and you might find this, I don't know in your situation, but you'll have to develop some language that helps you to be clear about what you're talking about. Some places are doing, when they say 100% renewable electricity for the city, what they mean is all the things that the city municipal buildings, the fleet, the so on, but not the citizens, not all of the community. And we were trying to say, no, it's everyone within the city limits that we're talking about. And so we tried to do sort of small c, big C, city operations versus city. So we called it community. Anyway, it's a kind of a complicated thing. You wouldn't think it would be, but when we say city, what do we mean? And so we try to be clear about that in the ordinance. He did veto it, and then the next day, the mayor, the city council president, one of the other council members, and another 10 people, including a Vista, our utility, went to Denmark and Sweden on a sustainability tour for a week together. It's very funny that they just then spent a week. So he vetoes it, and then they go to Denmark to talk about sustainability for a week. So that was interesting. They came back and right. So he vetoes it. That's our mayor, Mayor Condon, vetoes it. So after the veto, we're trying to figure out what the right strategy is. We felt like we had good, strong support with the council, but the council also said he wasn't going to veto it. So we weren't really sure, it was very unclear. Do we just let it go and don't do anything? Do we have another big push in letter writing? We didn't want to actually alienate our own supporters. Like we don't want to target the council members too much and annoy them if they're already supportive. You see the problem? It was sort of like we weren't really sure what to do at this point. It was an interesting sort of deliberation. What we ended up deciding to do was we did do another round. Action Network has great letter writing tools. You can automate it so that you can have it send to, so make sure you get the right email addresses, and you make sure you encourage your members to change the subject line, because our city email servers target as spam anything that like more than 3 or 4 messages that have the same subject line get spammed. And so we had a letter writing campaign to our council members and to the mayor, even though the mayor had already done his thing, thanking them for their vote, right? So thanking them and encouraging them to thanking them again for doing the right thing and overriding his veto, or they're about to, sort of assuming they're going to do the right thing, right? So not looking at it as sort of browbeating them, but just sort of hoping and assuming we continue to have their support, which we felt like we did. And then when we had the final meeting, we didn't encourage 100 people to come and speak again, even though we could have, because, again, we felt like we had enough support. So really, we just decided to make one group statement. We had one person speak, but we all stood up and stood behind her as she delivered comments on behalf of the entire group. And so it was actually quick. They had every intention of overriding it, as we had hoped. They did, rather than us sort of beating a dead horse. They were really happy that we didn't spend the next 3 hours giving more testimony that was really not going to help our case in that way. So they did override his veto, which was expected, but wasn't a sure thing until it was a sure thing. And it becomes law in a few days. So very